tap your microphone. Yep, that's on now, perfect. And that's got a red button, red light showing. Okay, I'll loosen that shot very slightly. So, yes, the questions I'm asking people. Can you remember where you were and what you thought when you heard that the Argentinians had invaded the Falkland Islands?
Well, we heard it on the 7 o'clock news while Tony was getting ready to go to work. And what do we think? Well, shock, I think, and bewilderment, really. Didn't know what it meant. It seemed to be right out of the blue. But I just took Tony into work as normal, thinking that he was going up to Scotland with the squadron were flying up to Scotland because there was a Russian submarine in the Clyde, or trying to track one of the Polaris submarines coming out of Faslane. So I didn't really know what to expect. Then got a phone call mid-morning from Tony saying, not going to Scotland, we're going to the South Atlantic. So it was just a blur of having to get a lot of domestic issues sorted before we went. I didn't really know what it was going to involve at all.
How long had you been married at this stage?
7 years.
And the children?
We had one son, Simon. He was 11 months old.
So quite a lot to take in. Can you remember when you heard that he was going to the Falklands? Can you remember what you were thinking?
Well, the main worry was the fact that we were adding on to the house, and we had a massive building work going on, and so there were all the practicalities of that. We were literally in the build stage, so we had to sort out how I was going to take over all the paying of the bills and that sort of thing, because in those days it was quite different. We rushed down into Helston to go to NatWest Bank so that I could get a mandate to sign his cheques, which has been very useful over the last 40 years. But there were really practical things like that, and what he should take, and so there was only time probably when we got to the evening to actually start thinking about what it might really mean, which we didn't really understand, because Tony had been involved in Cold War type exercises all the time, where in the North Atlantic with lots of ships, really worrying about the threat from the Soviet Union. So for sort of what seemed like you'd consider a friendly country to be invading an island I'd heard of, and I knew vaguely where it was, but that was about it. So bewilderment, I think, probably, and practically having to get on with sorting out how we were going to handle the next weeks or months.
And as the deployment was underway and Tony's on his way to a war, I suppose it started to sink in then.
Well, it did. I mean, they went up to Portsmouth, and then we were able to speak that night, because they didn't sail till the following day. So the squadron went up to join Hermes, and they were all quite excited about going off to do something that they'd been trained for, and we were sort of left with this vacuum, really, of not knowing what was going on. And then a sort of quiet period when they set off. Took 3 weeks or so of travelling down, got the occasional letter. The communications were very difficult, not like today when you just pick up the mobile phone. You had to wait for a letter. Phone call, you couldn't have a phone call really. And we heard all about the diplomatic efforts with General Haig, and sort of believing. And I remember my father, who'd been in the Second World War, saying, it won't come to it. No, it'll sail over the horizon, and then they'll be sailing back again. Trying to sort of jolly me along, really, but we just didn't know what was going on. And meanwhile, I had to try and keep as normal a life as possible going, because for Simon, who, he's suddenly just down to one parent, and got to get on with it.
Were you friendly with other military wives?
Oh yes, they were wonderful. Both people whose husband hadn't gone down were very dearest friend who I'd been at university with, who happened to live nearby, and she and her husband, who was one of Tony's friends, they were amazing, and the other wives from the squadron were fantastic, and another very dear friend, again, who Ian and Susie Mackenzie. Ian had gone on a different ship, and Susie was expecting a baby, and she and I used to get together every day. So if she hadn't arrived at Coverack Bridges by lunchtime, then I'd go down into Helston to find her. We just had a sort of unwritten sort of need to see each other, hear the news, and just try. And she had 2 boys, and so they would play with Simon, and we'd just try and keep life normal. But family and friends were absolutely amazing and essential. Very good.
Did you talk about the possibility of conflict, or was it just trying to?
Well, we watched the news all the time, and I don't think we sort of discussed what it. I suppose we thought what it might be like, to be widowed, but didn't go into it. You didn't think about it a great deal, because you just kind of tried to keep. It was pretty dark times. You tried to look on the bright side, really, or just not really, just hope for the best, I think. So, yeah.
And how often would the mail come? Tell me about the mail.
The mail. Well, it all came, it was feast or famine, and mostly famine, because they could only get the drop mail off as they're going down south, and that there were only limited places they could be taken off. And so Tony wrote a lot of letters, but they often were over, one letter might cover 3 or 4 days, because he knew the post wasn't going, so he'd just add to it. And they were wonderful, but they used to arrive, he used to number them actually, because then we knew in which order to read them, because they would arrive in a might get 3 or 4 at once, and then nothing for 3 weeks or so. It's a long time, especially once they were down there.
I suppose you were the last generation of military wives who had to rely on things like mail.
I think so, yes. I don't know about Bosnia and places, the conflicts that came between that and Afghanistan and Iraq, but certainly there were no mobile phones. It was pretty primitive, the communication.
There was a sort of hiatus as the task force was sailing down there. The diplomatic efforts are underway, but when the Belgrano was sunk, and then the Sheffield, it seemed to get very real here. What were you thinking at those moments?
Oh, it was a really dark time. I remember my parents were staying because the house needed childproofing. Simon learned to walk while Tony was away, and so Mum and Dad came down and were helping making stairgates, and and just things the builders were building, which I meant to say earlier on, they were great because they came in every day. So I had something I had to get up and get going, for them and for Simon. And but I remember that night, for some reason the house was very cold. I think we had a wood burning stove that wasn't going very well or something. And in the end, we'd heard the news, and we just all went to bed because it was just grim, just grim.
Was it scary?
Yes, scary, grim, unbelievable. You felt terrible for the people who died, not just our side, but the others as well. The picture of the Belgrano on it, sinking, and all those people lost. And then the Sheffield, and then we knew people who, we started to begin to know people who were killed or who were sunk, and what would that feel like, and it really brought it home. Yeah.
And of course your husband was down there. It was
very real.
It was now very real.
Yes.
And then it escalated. And how did you cope with that?
Again, just every day on the news, the spokesman from the Ministry of Defence would come along and announce what had happened that day, and you'd be sort of glued to the news, and it just, the news just seemed to get worse and worse, and then I suppose once the
What were you thinking at that time?
Well, I just hoping that it wouldn't happen to me. You know, that Tony would be all right, and how was he feeling? You know, what was it like being stuck in that tin can? You know, and all in that danger. So you're sort of feeling for yourself and for your family, and also feeling for him and what it must be like having been caught up in all that.
What was the feeling like amongst the other wives?
I think the same, and there was great. The squadron, the CO's wife Helen, was very proactive, and Maggie, one of the senior observer's wife, and you know, we used to get together a lot, and I think we tried not to just sort of dwell on it all the time. You know, you just try to sort of socialise and do things and try and keep spirits up, but it was hard. It was very hard. It really was. But it was family and friends were amazing, and not just squadron wise, but you know, local people. We lived in Coverack Bridges, and you know, knock on the door, and it was a very dear friend of ours who's become a very dear friend who organised this sort of great homecoming for Tony when we got back. But just sort of say, you know, if there's anything I can do, then, and I think it made you feel really part of the community. So there were sort of positive sides, I suppose, if you look back on it. And family, Tony's parents and my parents and my siblings, and they were great too. I didn't want to go anywhere. I very much stayed put down within the local area, because you know, they stayed at home because to kind of see people, and also because there was some support from Culdrose as well, and you know, didn't want to go anywhere in case there was news that, and again because communications were so you know, primitive compared, you know, if you went away, how would they get in touch with you, you know, if they needed to, because you haven't got a mobile phone. You had to leave your phone numbers everywhere that you went, and if there was bad news and they needed to let you know as next of kin.
So you had to carry on, but within limits.
Yes.
Put it to the back
it was
of your
surreal, honestly. It was surreal. Try not to dwell on it all the time, and you know, just kind of keep going. Yet you had this like a lead weight around your neck, or something in the pit of your stomach all the time. And what would they say at 6 o'clock tonight? You know.
And as you say, official communications presumably would only be bad if.
Yes, I mean, the worst thing would be if you saw somebody, you know, somebody in uniform walking with a padre walking up the garden path. You know, that would be very bad news, obviously, because. But I'm, you know, so lucky that it didn't happen.
When you heard that victory had been declared, what did you think?
You know, I think when literally, thank God, there was a lot of going to Culdrose, to the Sunday services, I must say, before that. But I mean, I think we really did think our prayers had been answered, and the fact, you know, I mean, I know there's still a chance that there'd be an accident or something like that, but you know, to know that it was all coming to an end was amazing, really, for everybody, not just for the squadron, but you know, for everybody involved on both sides, and for the Falklanders. You know, it was wonderful.
And when you got the news that Tony was fine and was coming home?
Oh, I did set off on a sort of tour around the family then, going to see everybody, and you know, and just sort of kind of trying to get life back to normal, and just, you know, huge relief and delight and all the rest of it. Tinged with sadness, I suppose, because we had lost we friends, and so much had been lost, really. And it seemed also unnecessary, really, you know, so unexpected and so futile, really.
When Tony came back, did he come back to Plymouth or to Portsmouth?
The ship, on a normal deployment, the aircraft would have flown off as they came past up the channel, but on this occasion, I think they wanted. Hermes was one of the first big ships to come back, I think, and first big carrier. So they wanted, the powers that be wanted, to come back to Portsmouth, to her home port, with all the aircraft on board. And I expect you've seen photographs. She looked a complete wreck, and I think it was a very poignant moment for everybody. It was quite tough, knowing we wouldn't see them straight away, and wanting to be there, and be part of the initial sort of euphoria of arrival and seeing that. So we watched it on television and shed a few tears, But the next day we'd been encouraged, the squadron, and one of the senior observers had flown back from Ascension early to sort of kind of brief everybody, if you like, but what to expect and how tired the men were, and how and what a lot they'd been through, and the sort of some of the privations they had, like food wise and that sort of thing. They'd had it ended. It was quite funny because they ended up saying they had too much broccoli, so be sure not to give them broccoli when they got back, because they'd overcated on that, and so it was the only fresh vegetable left, I think, and they'd even tried to make broccoli ice cream out of it. But so we were all geared up to go to Culdrose, and had a timetable all turned up, and I knew that the local community in Cover Up Bridges were planning this great celebration for Tony, and we've been painting banners and all the rest of it. So I drove down with Simon down to meet him, and wonderful sight of the 9 aircraft all flying. They've flown down, and I think they've gone via Dartmouth and all sorts of places, and done lots of flypasts on the way, and see them coming, huge excitement, and everybody was there. The local dignitaries and all the senior people from Culdrose, and all the squadron stuff, and families, and the media, and it was just, it was so exciting, and then we did all that. It's all a bit of a blur really, and then drove back home, and Tony, it was a surprise that Tony only came around the corner and stopped about 200 yards from home, but where there were 2 houses on either side of the road. There was a great big banner strung across the top, and hundreds, 50, 60 people, by all the local community, all the children, all the farmers coming from the field, the tractors parked everywhere, and all our local friends were, and somebody brought out the champagne, and there was cake, and Tony made a little speech, and it was amazing.
You were glad he was back?
Just a bit. Anyway, then we sort of had to settle down to life as normal, but not quite the same, We both been through a lot, and lovely house had finished. The builders had left, and then Tony had some leave, which was great, and his parents came down to stay. We had some time, just the 3 of us, and then he set off down to the South Atlantic again in September, but not in Hermes this time. They went down to continue the support, and he was away for Christmas. So that's, I suppose, we just put up with it,
So,
But I was expecting our second baby by then. So.
Telephones.
Yeah.
So there's been a long-term support to the islanders, and I guess they appreciate it, and they, it was the right thing to do. It was the wrong thing of Argentina, and the right thing of the Brits, So I don't think it was futile. I think it was, despite the horror of it, and the loss of life, and the the not just loss of life, but PTSD, which of course wasn't recognised then. So many people, many elderly servicemen, I think, have been seriously affected by it, and probably only really realised why, what the issue was more recently. So I think many of the homeless people and that sort of thing, could stem from then and other conflicts since. It's sad. It's very sad to think of what happened, but I suppose we both grew up a bit in that time. We were pretty carefree before that, and we got our carefreeness back, but it was tinged with perhaps a bit of maturity, if you like.
I suppose it was a conflict that has gone down well in the public imagination, hasn't it? There are certain, conflicts which people look back on, which history hasn't judged too kindly. But I think
yes, I think you're right. But I don't think the younger generation really know anything about it now. I'm not sure they do. I mean, it's been quite a revelation for Simon to actually hear more about it, and maybe have a bit more interest in it. I think for our generation, it's and probably for us, because every significant anniversary, like the 25th anniversary or something like that, obviously the Navy and the squadrons want to remember what they did and how brave they were and the people they lost and all the rest of it. I wonder, it's just faded into history for us. It's more than a generation ago now, but yes, it probably kept up the British pride at the time, but quite a cost for that, I think.